Welcome to the City Current Radio Show. I'm your host, Andrew Bartolotta. Today, we are talking with gifted storyteller, photographer, author, and peacemaker, John Noltner. John, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Andrew. It's good to be with you again.
I had the pleasure of getting to know you 2 years ago at the Points of Light conference, where you shared your exhibition, A Piece of My Mind. Give listeners a quick history for you and your career before we dive into your new book.
So I have spent my career as a freelance photographer, shooting for national magazines and Fortune 500 companies. Did that for 20 years or so. And back in 2008, 2009, two different things were going on in my life. The first is that I was frustrated with the quality of our national dialogue. I was concerned about all the things that ask us to look at what can separate us. And I wondered if there was something I could do with my photography and storytelling instead to remember what connects us. The second thing that was going on at that time is I like to say that the economy handed me some free time. The recession hit the world of freelance photography hard and fast. And if I was a better business person, I would have used that time to look for new clients. But I was concerned about this state of our social dialogue. And so I started just interviewing people and photographing them based around the question, what does peace mean to you? And what started as this small personal project, this little side gig, has now become my life's work.
Now, you're an author of 3 books, the newest being Portraits of Peace, Searching for Hope in a Divided America. Talk about what readers can learn from this book and then what inspired it.
So really, my first 2 books were rooted in sharing other people's stories. I intentionally quieted my own voice. I took a portrait of these people. We did these interviews, and the books are just a collection of their stories and their portraits. Eventually, in the course of doing this for 10 years or so, I realized that I had something that I wanted to say as well. Something about encountering difference, something about challenging my own expectations, listening deeply, learning how to be a better ally. And so I started writing this book. And so what you'll find, it's more of a memoir. It's a combination of travelogue and memoir and social commentary. It's pretty earnest because there are some serious challenges that we all face in the world. But it's also got a little bit of whimsy in it because that's who I am. And I think sometimes, it's important that we face these challenges honestly and directly, but I also think that it's important that we face them with a hope, a grace, and a belief that something better is possible. And so what you'll find is a combination of my own personal journey in working on this project, as well as sharing some of the wisdom and beauty of the folks who I encountered along the way.
You've traveled over 40,000 miles, traveling around the country, giving keynotes and workshops and sharing your exhibition, talking about how storytelling is a way to connect people. Give us a few stories that have impacted you and others through your journey. And in fact, we were talking before this, and you currently sold your home and are on the road full time. So tell us more about that as well.
Oh yeah, where to start? So so this third chapter of the project, well, maybe this is the 4th chapter, I'm not sure. As I was finishing this book, we're in the midst of the pandemic. George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis, just a few miles north of my house. We're going through a really contentious political season. And so as I was finishing this book, it was clear that there was even more work to do. There were even more stories to tell. And so my wife, Karen, and I decided, our kids were grown. I was tired of mowing the lawn, and no, that's a lie. She was tired of mowing the lawn. That's something that she enjoyed doing. We were sort of done with this house that we had raised our family in. So we decided to sell it, and we bought an RV. And for the last 11 months now, we've been on the road, traveling the country, gathering news stories for what I'm sure will be book number 4 eventually. But some of the stories that we've met, what continues to fascinate me is all of these people that we've met who have encountered significant challenges in their lives, but they have chosen to respond with grace and forgiveness and hope. And again, the belief that something better is possible. And so what I find the most fascinating is people who find themselves in difficult situations, but make the choice to move towards healing instead of division, who make the choice to move towards transformation. And so, these are people like Bud Welsh, who I met in Oklahoma City, who lost his only child, Julie Marie, in the Oklahoma City bombing. But eventually realized that he needed to meet Timothy McVeigh's father, the perpetrator of the violence, and let him know that he didn't hold his father responsible for what had happened. So they sat together at the dining or at the kitchen table, and got to know one another at the McVeigh family house. And Bud realized there that he realized he didn't want Timothy McVeigh to die. He didn't want Timothy McVeigh to be executed. And he realized that he was forgiving him. Bud says in his interview, he said, I'll tell you one thing, forgiveness doesn't do a thing for the killer, but you absolutely free yourself. And that's where the good happens. People like Panina Bowman in Atlanta, Georgia, who tells a story about growing up in World War II Europe, when her family was taken to a concentration camp and 42 members of her family died at Auschwitz. And she talks about how difficult of an experience that was, but she also said that when she was there, she realized that she didn't want to hate. She made a choice not to hate, because she realized that hate is intended to destroy somebody else, but in fact, it circles back and it destroys you instead. So these amazing stories of courage and hope and forgiveness and transformation, and people who are finding ways to bridge divides and build community in extraordinary circumstances.
What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned that have surprised you along your 40,000 plus mile journey?
Oh man, there are so many lessons, Andrew. And that's the fascinating thing for me, is each time I sit down with somebody and have a conversation, someone with a different life experience than me, someone with a different political bend than me, when we sit down and we have these full and deep conversations, I wind up learning something from everybody along the way. Eventually, there are some really interesting themes that have developed. But for me personally, the three lessons that I keep coming back to are, first, to listen deeply. We'll listen in order to correct or coerce or convince somebody or debate or debunk, but the act of listening just to understand can be rare. And so this has been a practical exercise in deep listening. And so that's the first lesson, to listen deeply. The second is to challenge my own expectations. I walk into so many of these interviews with expectations, with preconceived notions. And I find as we sit down and we have these full conversations, as I engage in this deep listening, I have the opportunity to challenge those expectations, to realize that the reality is a little bit more complex and a little bit more nuanced than I understood walking into it. So that's the second. And the third one is to just keep showing up. All of these challenges that we face in the world, these are not challenges that are going to have overnight solutions. These are not short-term issues that we're going to have to deal with, whether we're talking about race or class or gender, politics, faith, any of these things. These are long-term commitments. And along the way, we're going to stumble. Along the way, we're going to hit roadblocks. But if we commit to keep showing up, if we commit to keep doing the work, together we can find a path forward. So I think those are the three at the root. Listen deeply, challenge your own expectations, and keep showing up. And these are things that you don't have to sell your house and take a 40,000 mile road trip to do. These are things that you can do each and every day in our encounters with one another.
Absolutely. Those are lessons we can all learn from. And I love those three tips. John, you're helping a polarized world rediscover the common humanity that connects us. You're creating your legacy every day, but what do you want people to say about John Noltner decades from now?
I could answer that in a couple different ways. First, I'll joke a little bit. There's an oral historian by the name of Studs Terkel, used to work for Chicago Public Radio. He has been a hero of mine as I was growing up. If someday somebody says John Noltner was like Studs Terkel, but with a camera, I would be thrilled. But more than anything, I would hope that people would say John Noltner helped create a space where people could pause and consider the complexities of the issues, um, and learn how to bridge divides and build community.
I love that. So let's have some fun, because we've said a couple of times, you've had this 40,000 mile plus journey. Where are some of your favorite places, whether it's lodging, food, attractions? Where are some of your favorite places that you've been to across the nation, across the globe, that you would encourage other people to visit?
Oh my goodness. I'm gonna focus just on across the nation for now, because
Okay.
otherwise I could talk forever. I mean, I've photographed in 38 different countries: Cuba, India, Thailand. I find all of it exotic and fascinating and beautiful. As a photographer and a writer, I've come to believe that there's beauty and wisdom all around us if we take the time to see it. Some of my favorite places in this country, for different reasons. That picture on the cover of the book is in Clarksdale, Mississippi, which I know is not far from you. I
Yeah.
have a deep, deep love for Clarksdale, Mississippi, and the blues music that's there. I love the desert Southwest, just from a landscape perspective, around Arches and Zion, and we'll be spending some time there this winter as I catch up on my editing. If I had to pick one place to live, well, besides the Midwest, which is where my family is, so that's always going to be home. But the part of the country I love the most is the Pacific Northwest, and that's where we've just been. The combination of ocean and mountains and green things is just amazing to me. So we've just spent time over the last month in Everett, Washington, north of Seattle, and we've been hiking on the Olympic Peninsula, hiking up Mount Rainier. I could be convinced to settle there.
I love it. I think it's always fun for those that have traveled to really share the insights and places that maybe, aren't on the map of people's travels, but also off the beaten path that people would want to travel to. And speaking of travel, like we said, you give keynote presentations and workshops and sharing your exhibition. For those who are a company, a community that want to bring you, John, to their city, how does that look like? What is that sort of entail, and how can people reach out to you?
Yeah. The easiest way to reach out is on our website, which is just apieceofmymind.net, or the acronym APOMM.net. We do everything from adult education hours in churches and faith communities to week-long and even month-long residencies at universities and companies and conferences across the country. And we'll install the exhibit. I'll do workshops around storytelling as a way to connect. And the other thing we do, which is really interesting, is I'll set up a portable studio and we'll gather stories on site. This is something that you saw at the Points of Light conference, where we'll ask a prompt. We'll do a black and white portrait and ask for a 25-word response. And in a day, we can collect 30 or 40 or 50 or sometimes even 100 of these. And then in an insane timeline, we crunch these files, we do the production overnight, and then we reflect them back to the community at a closing session. And this is a way to use this kind of photography and storytelling to help communities articulate their mission, vision, and values in the world. So we do that in person around the country. We also do virtual workshops and programs around the country as well.
Very cool. Now, again, where can people go to learn more about you, purchase your books, learn about your new book, and contact you about having you come to their city?
Yeah, apieceofmymind.net, and it's PEACE, that kind of peace. And there's a contact page right there where people can reach us. If folks are interested in the new book, Portraits of Peace, Searching for Hope in a Divided America, that's available anywhere you buy books. Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can walk down to your neighborhood bookstore and ask for it, and they'll be able to get it too. So wherever you like to buy books, ask for Portraits of Peace and they'll have it.
Once again, that's Portraits of Peace, Searching for Hope in a Divided America. John Noltner, thank you so much for joining us today.
Andrew, it's great to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity.